The floating candles in the great hall had always burned with a warm, golden light. At least, that's what Neville Longbottom remembered. Tonight, as he sat at the Gryffindor table with his hands folded tight in his lap, the flames seemed pale, thin, as if even the enchanted fire knew something fundamental had changed. Severus Snape stood at the podium where Dumbledore once welcomed them home. Neville's throat felt tight. Around him, the usual start-of-term chatter had died to uneasy whispers. First years clutched their robes, wide-eyed. The older students sat rigid, faces carefully blank. Even the house ghosts drifted through the walls more slowly than usual. Nearly headless Nick's typical cheerfulness dimmed to something watchful. "Welcome," Snape said, his voice carrying through the hall without warmth, "to another year at Hogwarts." No mentions of new beginnings, no talk of house unity or academic excellence, just those cold words delivered like a curse. Beside the new headmaster stood two figures Neville had never seen before. The woman had a pale, twisted face and eyes that seemed to enjoy the student's discomfort. The man was broad-shouldered, his smile cruel beneath lank hair. They wore teaching robes, but something about them felt wrong, like Dementors draped in academic dress. "I introduce Professor Electo Carrow," Snape continued, gesturing to the woman, "who will be teaching Muggle studies, and her brother, Professor Amicus Carrow, who assumes the position of instructor in defense against the dark arts." A cold laugh came from the Slytherin table. Neville didn't turn to look. "The curriculum," Snape said softly, "has been revised to reflect more practical approach to magical education. The study of Muggles, for instance, will now focus on understanding their true nature. Defense classes will embrace techniques previously considered unsuitable for young minds. These changes reflect our world's evolution." Neville felt his grandmother's last letter burning in his pocket. "Be safe, dear boy. Keep your head down. Come home for Christmas." He couldn't do that. Not anymore. Down the table, he caught Ginny Weasley's eye. Her jaw was set, her brown eyes fierce, with the same stubborn fire her brother Ron carried. She gave him the smallest nod, barely perceptible, but enough. Across the hall, at the Ravenclaw table, Luna Lovegood gazed at the ceiling with her usual dreamy expression, but her wand hand rested on the table, fingers tense. "Finally," Snape continued, "I remind you all that the Forbidden Forest remains precisely that, forbidden. Students found outside their dormitories after hours will face severe consequences. The castle's rules exist for your protection." The word protection sounded like a threat in his mouth. "The feast," Snape concluded, waving one pale hand, "will now begin." Food appeared on the golden plates, but Neville's appetite had vanished. He pushed roast potatoes around his plate, watching the staff table. McGonagall sat stiff-backed, her lips pressed into the thinnest line he'd ever seen. Professor Flitwick looked unusually small in his chair. Hagrid's seat remained empty. Neville's stomach twisted in his absence. "Lovely start to the year," Seamus Finnegan muttered beside him. "Really sets the tone, doesn't it?" "Shut it," Dean Thomas whispered sharply. "Not here." But Seamus was right. The tone had been set. The castle itself felt different, as if Hogwarts were holding its breath, waiting to see what its new master would do. The proof came the next morning. Neville was heading to herbology, his favourite subject, and the one place he still felt competent, when he heard the crying. He rounded the corner near the marble staircase and stopped cold. A second-year Hufflepuff girl, he thought her name was Margaret, or maybe Mary, knelt on the stone floor, her arms wrapped around herself. Her quill lay broken beside her spilled bag. Books scattered across the corridor. And standing over her, wand still raised, was Amicus Caro. "Clumsy little mudblood," Caro said, his voice carrying false cheer. "Dropping things in my path, making me late for breakfast. What should we do about that?" The girl's robes showed scorch marks. Her hands trembled. Neville's wand was in his hand before he thought. But another voice cut through first. "Mr. Caro." McGonagall appeared from a side corridor, her tartan robes swishing. Her voice remained perfectly measured, but something deadly lived in her eyes. "I believe the students' books have blocked the stairway to my classroom. I shall escort her along. As it happens, I need someone to water the practice transformation mice." It wasn't a question. Caro's smile widened. "Of course, Professor. How helpful of you." He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "Mind you, teach her some coordination while you're at it." McGonagall helped the girl to her feet with gentle hands, then guided her down the corridor without another word to Caro. But as she passed Neville, her eyes met his for just a moment. The message was clear. Pick your battles. Stay smart. Neville stood frozen as Caro strolled away, whistling. His hands wouldn't stop shaking through all of herbology. That evening, Neville found himself by the Gryffindor common room fireplace long after most students had gone to bed. The fat lady's portrait had taken some convincing to let him back in past curfew, but she'd relented when he explained he'd been helping Professor Sprout with venomous tentacula repotting. The fire crackled softly, its warmth a small comfort. House elves had been through earlier. The cushions were fluffed, the scattered wizard chess pieces returned to their board, fresh wood stacked beside the hearth. Even now, in this strange new darkness, the small magics continued. Couldn't sleep either? Ginny emerged from the girls' dormitory staircase, her red hair loose around her shoulders. She'd changed into comfortable clothes, but her wand was tucked in her belt, always ready. "Keep thinking about that second year," Neville admitted. "Mary? Margaret?" "Marjorie Wilkins," Ginny said, settling into the chair across from him. "Her parents own a bookshop in Charing Cross. She told me about it last year. Said they have a cat that sleeps in the magical theory section." Her voice went hard. "She's 12 years old, Neville." McGonagall helped her. McGonagall can't be everywhere. Ginny leaned forward, firelight catching the determined set of her jaw. "And she has to be careful. If Snape sacks her, who'll be left to run interference?" The portrait hole opened again, and Luna Lovegood climbed through with her usual unhurried grace. She wore radish earrings and a nightdress covered in stars that seemed to actually twinkle. "The fat lady says you're plotting," Luna announced cheerfully, settling on the floor beside Neville's chair. "She's quite excited about it. Apparently the portraits have been terribly boring since the last war ended." Ginny and Neville exchanged glances. "We're not," Neville started. "Yes, you are," Luna said, tilting her head. "Or you should be. The castle's unhappy, you know. I can feel it in the way the staircases move. They're trying to help students avoid the Caros, but staircases can only do so much." Neville had noticed that, actually. The marble staircase had developed a habit of swinging away from the dark arts corridor right before class time, making students late and earning them detentions, but keeping them away from Amicus Caro for a few extra minutes. Harry left us the DA, Ginny said quietly. Taught us to fight. We can't just stop. Not now. Not when it matters most. The Carrows would love an excuse to expel us, Neville pointed out, even as something in his chest pulled tight with wanting. Or, worse, they're looking for reasons. Then we don't give them reasons. Ginny's eyes gleamed. We give them ghosts, rumours, things that happen when no one's watching. Luna hummed softly, running her fingers over the worn rug. We'd need somewhere safe, somewhere even Snape couldn't find it, somewhere that understands what we need before we ask. The three of them fell silent. The fire popped. Somewhere in the castle, a suit of armour shifted position. The ancient stones held centuries of secrets, students who'd resisted, who'd hidden, who'd fought when fighting seemed impossible. Neville thought of his parents, of St. Mungo's 4th floor, of his mother pressing gum wrappers into his hand, her mind shattered by Bellatrix Lestrange's curse because she wouldn't betray her friends. Courage didn't always look like Harry Potter facing down Death Eaters. Sometimes it looked like his mum, broken but unbeaten. Sometimes it looked like a second-year girls' book scattered on cold stone. Sometimes it looked like 3 students by a common room fire, deciding to be brave when being safe would be so much easier. The room of requirement, Neville said slowly. Harry showed us. It appears when you really need it. Does it still work? Ginny asked. With Snape as headmaster, with everything changed. Only one way to find out. Luna stood, her starry nightdress swirling. The castle remembers Dumbledore. I think it remembers kindness. I think it wants to help. It was mad. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of reckless thing that would make his grandmother despair, and his parents, if they could understand, proud beyond words. Neville pushed himself to his feet. His hands had stopped shaking. All right, he said. Let's go. The 7th floor corridor lay empty, under the watchful eyes of painted faces. Portraits murmured as the 3 students unpassed. Whispers too low to make out clearly, but the tone felt almost encouraging. An old wizard in a burgundy frame gave them a solemn nod. They stopped before a stretch of blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Balmy attempting to train trolls for the ballet. 3 times, Ginny whispered. Walk past 3 times, thinking about what you need. They joined hands, Luna's fingers cool and steady, Ginny's warm and certain, and began to pace. We need a place to fight back, Neville thought fiercely. We need somewhere to protect the students the Carrows want to hurt. We need a sanctuary, a headquarters, a home for the army Harry started. We need a place to be brave. Luna's gentle presence seemed to whisper beside him. We need a place to resist. Ginny's fire burned bright and clear. 3 times they walked. The castle settled around them, that deep, ancient settling of stone and magic that Hogwarts sometimes did, as if the building itself were paying attention. On the 3rd pass, a door materialized. Simple wood, brass handle, nothing fancy. But when Neville pushed it open, his breath caught. The room was smaller than the vast training space Harry had shown them, but it felt purposeful, comfortable. Hammocks hung from wooden beams. Cushions lay scattered across a carpeted floor. Bookshelves lined one wall, defense texts, healing guides, even a few joke books from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. A small kitchen area occupied one corner, steam rising from a kettle that had appeared without being asked. And along the far wall, 7 doors stood closed, each marked with a simple symbol he didn't yet understand. But it was the windows that struck him most. They weren't real windows. They couldn't be 7 floors up in the castle's interior. But they showed Hogwarts grounds bathed in moonlight. The forbidden forest swayed gently. Stars wheeled overhead. Safe, peaceful, the world as it should be. "It's perfect," Ginny breathed. Luna walked to the center of the room and turned slowly, her arms outstretched. "The castle says welcome home." Neville felt something tight in his chest loosen. For the first time since the train had pulled into Hogsmeade Station, since Snape's cold welcome, since watching a 12-year-old girl hexed for dropping a quill, felt like he could breathe properly. They had a base. They had each other. They had a castle that remembered what Hogwarts was supposed to be. It wasn't much. Not yet. But it was a start. "So," Neville said, looking at his 2 friends, these 2 fierce, brilliant witches who'd chosen to stand beside him. "I suppose we're actually doing this." Ginny's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Dumbledore's army, still recruiting." Luna settled onto a cushion, already looking at home. "The Carrows think they've won, but they don't understand Hogwarts. This castle protects its own." Through the illusory windows, dawn began to break over the enchanted grounds, pink and gold spreading across the sky. A new day, a new resistance. Neville Longbottom, who'd spent 6 years being afraid of his own shadow, who'd lost his parents to Voldemort's madness, who'd been told he'd never amount to much, sat down with his friends and began to plan how to save their school. The castle hummed softly around them, approving. The forgotten year had begun. Luna Lovegood had always believed that rooms had moods, just like people. The Ravenclaw common room felt curious and slightly judgmental. The Great Hall felt proud and ancient. The library felt hungry for quiet. But the Room of Requirement felt alive. She stood at its centre 3 days after their first discovery, turning slowly while Neville and Ginny inventoried the bookshelves. Morning light, or what passed for morning light in this magical space, filtered through the impossible windows. The room had changed slightly since their first visit. A large wooden table now dominated one corner, its surface already marked with scorch marks and ink stains, as if it remembered being used for spell practice. The hammocks had multiplied, and along the western wall a mirror had appeared that didn't show reflections, but instead displayed a constantly shifting map of Hogwarts corridors. "That wasn't here yesterday," Ginny said, noticing Luna's attention. "The room learns," Luna replied, moving closer to the mirror. Tiny figures moved through the corridors. Students, professors, even Mrs. Norris prowling the dungeons. "It's showing us where everyone is. How thoughtful." Neville joined them, squinting at the map. His face still carried the pinched look he'd worn since term started, but something in his eyes had sharpened. "That's incredibly useful and slightly terrifying. How does it know?" "Hogwarts knows everything that happens inside its walls," Luna said simply. She reached out to touch the mirror's surface, and it rippled like water. "The castle's been here for 1,000 years. I expect it pays attention." The door opened behind them, and they all spun, wands half raised. But it was only Seamus Finnegan, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Blimey," he breathed, taking in the room. "So the rumours are true. You lot have actually started up the DA again." "Who told you?" Ginny demanded. "The fat lady mentioned something to the cavalier in the 7th floor portrait. Who told Sir Cadogan? Who told everyone within shouting distance?" Seamus grinned weakly. The portraits are terrible gossip, but they're on our side, I think." Neville and Ginny exchanged glances. They'd hoped to keep this quiet for longer. "We're not starting up the DA," Neville said carefully. "We're just providing a safe space for students who need it." "Right," Seamus's expression turned serious. "Like Hannah Abbott, whose mum just got killed by Death Eaters. Caro announced it in Muggle Studies yesterday, made her stand up in front of everyone, said it was a learning opportunity about Muggle-wizard relations." Luna felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd seen Hannah in the corridor that morning, her Hufflepuff robes rumpled, her eyes red and swollen. "She's not coming back to classes," Seamus continued, "locked herself in her dormitory. Susan Bones is worried she's not eating." Ginny's hands clenched into fists. "We need to get her out of there. And bring her here," Luna added softly. "The room provides food. I've been experimenting. If you think about what you need strongly enough, the house elves can hear you somehow. Tea and toast appeared yesterday when I was feeling peckish." Neville looked at the room, the hammocks, the safe space, the magical map. "We really are doing this, aren't we? Hiding students, running an actual resistance." "Did you think we were going to stop at just having a secret room?" Ginny asked. "I suppose not." Neville straightened his shoulders. "Right. Seamus, can you bring Hannah here tonight, after curfew?" "Consider it done." Seamus paused at the door. "You know word spreading, yeah? About the graffiti." Luna smiled. The graffiti had been Ginny's idea, executed 2 nights ago, while Luna kept watch using a disillusionment charm she'd read about in a 5th-year text. Dumbledore's army, still recruiting. Now decorated a corridor wall near the dungeons in permanent paint. "Good," Ginny said fiercely. "Let it spread. Let everyone know we haven't given up." By the end of the week, the room had sheltered 6 students overnight. Hannah Abbott came first, brought by Seamus and Susan Bones. She'd curled up in a hammock and slept for 14 hours straight, while Luna kept watch, occasionally refreshing the mug of hot chocolate that appeared on the nearby table. When Hannah finally woke, she'd cried quietly, accepted a plate of house elf-provided breakfast, and thanked them in a voice barely above a whisper. Then came Dennis Creevey, a 3rd-year Gryffindor whose Muggle-born status had made him a target for Electo Caro's special attention. His brother Colin had left school, pulled out by their father after the Ministry fell, but Dennis had nowhere else to go. He arrived with bruises from a practical demonstration in Muggle studies and absolute determination not to let the Caros win. 2 Ravenclaw first years followed, both terrified after witnessing Amicus Caro force an older student to practice the Cruciatus curse on a spider. They'd hidden in a bathroom for 3 hours before Luna found them and brought them to safety. The room adapted. More hammocks appeared. A bathroom manifested behind one of the mysterious doors along the back wall, complete with a shower that provided perfect water temperature and towels that smelled of lavender. The food situation resolved itself through what Luna suspected was direct house elf intervention. Meals appeared on the wooden table 3 times daily, always warm and comforting. "It's like the castle's taking care of us," Dennis said one evening, munching on shepherd's pie. "Of course it is," Luna replied, examining a set of old galleons she'd found in her trunk. "Hogwarts has always taken care of students who needed it. That's what it was built for." Neville sat across from her, reviewing a list of defensive spells. He'd grown quieter over the past few days, more focused. The uncertainty that usually shadowed his features had been replaced by something harder, more determined. "We need a better communication system," he said without looking up. "Can't rely on portraits. They mean well, but they can't keep secrets. And we need a way to call for help if someone's in trouble." Luna held up one of the galleons. "Remember these? Harry showed us at the first DA meeting. Hermione charmed them. Protean charm, I think. When Harry changed the numbers on his coin, all the others changed to match." "Brilliant," Ginny said, appearing from the bathroom door where she'd been helping one of the first year's wash paint out of her hair, courtesy of an accident in Electo's class. "Can you do it?" "I can try." Luna had been reading about the Protean charm for weeks now, fascinated by its elegant complexity. It's NEUT level magic, but the theory is straightforward, linking objects through sympathetic magical resonance. "I'll need time to practice." "Take all the time you need," Neville said. "But this is important, Luna. If we can coordinate, really coordinate, we can do more than just hide students. We can actively disrupt what the Carrows are doing." Something in his voice made Luna look up. There was steel there now, where before there had only been uncertainty. "You're thinking like a leader," she observed. Neville flushed. "I'm thinking like someone who's tired of watching 12-year-olds get hexed." The portrait passages revealed themselves slowly, like the castle sharing secrets with trusted friends. Luna discovered the first one by accident. She'd been examining a painting of Vindictus Viridian, a medieval wizard known for brewing a poison so deadly that just speaking its name made flowers wilt, when the painted figure suddenly winked at her. "You're one of the Resistance children," Vindictus said, his voice like rustling parchment. "I suppose I am," Luna agreed. "I knew resistors once, during the Goblin rebellions of 1612. He leaned forward in his frame. "Brave students, use the portrait network to move through the castle unseen. Would you like to know how?" Luna would very much like to know how. Vindictus explained that certain portraits, those painted by Armando Dippet, a headmaster with a fondness for secret passages, connected to narrow corridors behind the walls. If you knew which frames to ask, and if the portrait trusted you, they'd swing open, like doors. "How do we earn their trust?" Luna asked. "By being worth trusting, child. The portraits have been watching you. We know what you're doing." His painted eyes gleamed. "We remember what Hogwarts is supposed to be. Ask politely, show respect. We'll help." Luna immediately fetched Neville and Ginny. By midnight, they'd mapped 17 portrait passages, hidden corridors that ran behind classroom walls, between dormitory towers, even behind the staff table in the Great Hall. The room's magical map updated automatically as they discovered each new route, thin golden lines appearing to show the secret ways. "This changes everything," Ginny breathed, studying the map. "We can move anywhere in the castle without being seen. We can rescue students from detentions. We can get expelled if we're caught," Neville interrupted, but his eyes shone with possibility. "Or worse. The Carrows would love an excuse to use unforgivables on students." "Then we don't get caught," Ginny said simply. Luna traced one of the golden lines with her finger. It ran from the 7th floor all the way down to the dungeons, emerging behind a portrait of Salazar Slytherin himself. "The castle trusts us," she said softly. "I can feel it. These passages have been here for centuries, but they're showing themselves now because Hogwarts knows we need them." You really think the castle is sentient? Neville asked. Don't you? After everything we've seen. Luna smiled. Hogwarts has a heart. It's been beating for 1,000 years. Right now, it's beating for us. The first rescue mission happened on a Tuesday night. A Hufflepuff 6th year named Ernest Macmillan had been assigned detention with Amicus Carrow for insolent questioning during defense against the dark arts. According to the whispers spreading through the school, Carrow's detentions now involved practicing unforgivable curses. We can't let that happen, Ginny said flatly. They gathered in the room of requirement. Neville, Luna, Ginny, Seamus, and Lavender Brown, who joined their group after watching Alecto Carrow mock a Muggle-born second year to tears. The magical map showed Ernest's scheduled route, classrooms to dungeons, 8 p.m. Portrait passage behind the suits of armour on the 3rd floor, Neville said, his finger tracing the golden line. Comes out near Carrow's office. We intercept Ernest before he arrives, bring him through the passage to the 7th floor, and get him to the room. And when Carrow realizes his detention victim never showed up, Lavender asked. Ernest says he got lost, Luna suggested. The staircases have been moving unpredictably. It's not implausible. He'll still face consequences, Seamus pointed out. Better than practicing Crucio on a classmate, Ginny said grimly. They moved through the portrait passages at 7:45, Luna leading the way with her wand lit. The corridors behind the walls were narrow and dusty, clearly unused for decades. Cobwebs brushed Luna's face. The painted portraits they passed whispered encouragement. 3rd floor armour, she announced, finding the portrait of a medieval knight that Vindictus had told her about. Sir Quentin, may we pass? The knight bowed. His frame swung open. They emerged behind the suits of armour just as Ernest appeared around the corner, his face pale but determined. His eyes widened at their sudden appearance. What? No time, Neville said, grabbing his arm. Trust us. Do you want to go to that detention? Ernest looked between them, understanding dawn. No. God, no. Then come with us, quickly. They bundled him back through the portrait passage, Sir Quentin swinging shut behind them with a metallic clang. Through the walls they heard footsteps, probably Filch, doing his rounds, but the passages kept their secrets. Back in the room of requirement, Ernest collapsed onto a cushion, shaking. He was going to make me curse another student, he whispered. A 1st year. He said it was practical education, that we needed to understand pain to defend against it. Luna brought him tea that appeared on the table, already sweetened exactly how he liked it. The room's small magic at work again. You're safe here. Stay the night. Stay as long as you need. But Carrow. Let us worry about Carrow, Ginny said, her voice hard. Neville sat down beside Ernest, and Luna watched something shift in her friend's expression. This was what leadership looked like, she realized. Not grand speeches or dramatic gestures. Just sitting with a frightened classmate and saying quietly, "We won't let them do this to you. I promise." Ernest nodded, some tension leaving his shoulders. Luna returned to her corner of the room, where her galleons lay spread across a cushion. The Protean charm was complex. She'd been practicing for days, her wand movements growing more precise, the magical theory clicking into place like puzzle pieces. She picked up 2 coins, focused her intent, and whispered the incantation. The coins warmed in her palm. She set one down and changed the serial number on the other. The second coin's numbers shifted to match. "Neville," she called softly. "Ginny, look." They crowded around as she demonstrated, changing the numbers again and again, watching both coins transform in perfect synchronization. "You did it," Ginny breathed. "I did it," Luna agreed, surprised by her own success. "Now we can communicate, set meeting times, send warnings." She looked at her friends, at Ernest recovering on his cushion, at the room that sheltered them all. "Now we're really dangerous." Neville smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "Dumbledore's army," he said, "still recruiting, still fighting." Through the impossible windows, stars wheeled across a painted sky. The castle hummed its approval. And in a secret room on the 7th floor, 7 students, children, really, none of them yet 17, began planning how to wage war against the darkness with nothing but determination, friendship, and a castle that remembered what it meant to protect the innocent. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by his grandmother's ancient eagle owl during breakfast. Neville recognized the perfect copperplate handwriting before he even broke the seal, and his stomach clenched. Around him, the great hall buzzed with forced normalcy. Students ate porridge and toast. Owls swooped through the enchanted ceiling. The Carrows sat at the staff table, surveying their domain with satisfied expressions. Everything looked almost ordinary, if you didn't notice the tense shoulders, the nervous glances, the way conversations died whenever a professor walked past. Neville unfolded the parchment. "Dearest Neville, your last letter concerns me greatly. You write of your studies and the changing curriculum, but you say nothing of substance. You've always been transparent with me, even when you'd rather not be. I'm not a fool, child. I know what Severus Snape is. I know what his appointment means. Your parents fought Death Eaters. I will not lose you to them as well. Keep your head down. Focus on your studies. Do not draw attention. Whatever is happening at that school, it is not your battle to fight. You are not your father, Neville. You are not required to be a hero. Come home for Christmas. We will discuss your continuing education then." With love and concern, Grandmother Neville folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket, where it sat heavy as a stone. Across the Gryffindor table, Ginny caught his eye. She raised an eyebrow in question. He shook his head slightly. Not now. The lie sat bitter on his tongue. He'd written to his grandmother about herbology projects and a challenging transfiguration essay. He hadn't mentioned the room of requirement, now sheltering 11 students on a semi-permanent basis. Hadn't mentioned the portrait passages or the protean-charmed galleons Luna had successfully created and distributed to 23 trusted students. Hadn't mentioned that he was teaching defense against the dark arts 3 nights a week to anyone brave enough to show up. He definitely hadn't mentioned that he'd become, somehow, a leader. You are not your father. No, he wasn't Frank Longbottom, legendary aura. He was Neville Longbottom, who'd spent 6 years being forgetful and frightened, who'd melted his 6th cauldron in potions just last year, who still sometimes woke up sweating from nightmares about Bellatrix Lestrange's cold laughter. But he was also the boy who'd stood up to his friends in first year, who'd fought in the Department of Mysteries, who'd taken a curse meant for a first year and would carry the scar from Amicus Carrow's cutting hex for the rest of his life. Maybe he wasn't his father. Maybe that was all right. "Neville?" Seamus touched his shoulder. "You look miles away, mate." "Just thinking," Neville said, pushing his plate away. His appetite had disappeared. "We've got a DA tonight, yeah?" 8 o'clock. Luna sent the signal through the coins. Seamus lowered his voice. 27 confirmed attendees, words still spreading. 27. The number had grown every week. What had started as a desperate attempt to protect a few students had become something larger, a real resistance movement operating in Hogwarts' shadows. The weight of it pressed against Neville's chest like a physical thing. The room of requirement had transformed itself again. When Neville arrived that evening, slipping through the portrait of Barnabas the Barmy after checking the magical map for patrol routes, he found the space configured for learning. The hammocks and cushions had retreated to the edges. The central area now held practice dummies, protective padding along the walls, and orderly rows of cushions for students to sit on. Books on defensive magic lined the shelves, organized by difficulty. Luna sat cross-legged in the corner, her wand moving in precise patterns as she practiced a shielding charm. Sparks of silver light flickered around her like curious fireflies. "That's beautiful," Neville said, settling beside her. "It's a Protego variation," Luna replied, not breaking concentration. "I found it in a book from 1714. Apparently, it can reflect curses back to the caster if you concentrate hard enough. I thought it might be useful." "Everything you do is useful." It was true. Luna had single-handedly revolutionized their communication system, discovered half the portrait passages they now used, and had an uncanny ability to sense when students needed help before they even asked. "You're nervous," Luna observed, finally lowering her wand, her protuberant eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable accuracy. "About teaching." "I'm always nervous about teaching." "No, this is different. You're worried you'll fail them. All those students coming tonight trusting you to prepare them for what the Carrows might do." She tilted her head. "You're carrying too much weight, Neville. Leaders don't have to carry everything alone." "I'm not a leader," Neville said automatically. "Then what are you?" The question hung in the air between them. What was he? A scared 17-year-old playing at rebellion? A boy trying to live up to parents who'd never recognize him? Or something else? Something he was still becoming? The door opened before he could answer. Students began arriving in 2s and 3s, slipping through from various portrait passages throughout the castle. Dennis Creevey, with his ever-present camera tucked safely in his robes. Hannah Abbott, looking steadier now after a week of safety and regular meals. The Pattle twins, Lavender Brown, Seamus, and Dean. 2 fifth-year Ravenclaws Neville barely knew. A handful of Hufflepuffs led by Ernest Macmillan, who'd become one of their most dedicated members after they'd rescued him from Carrow's detention. And Ginny, arriving last with 3 first years in tow, children who looked absolutely terrified, but determined. 27 students, all looking at him expectantly. Neville stood, his hands clenching involuntarily. His wand felt heavy in his pocket, his father's wand, passed down through his grandmother, carrying the weight of legacy and expectation. "Right," he said, his voice coming out steadier than he felt. "Welcome back. For those who are new, I'm Neville Longbottom. This is Dumbledore's army. Harry Potter started it 2 years ago to teach us real defense magic when Umbridge wouldn't. We're continuing that tradition." He gestured to Luna and Ginny. "Luna Lovegood handles our communication network and research. Ginny Weasley coordinates our protective operations. Together, we're trying to make Hogwarts safe again." One of the first years raised a trembling hand. "Is it true you saved Ernest from having to torture someone?" "We helped Ernest avoid a situation that would have hurt him and another student," Neville said carefully. "That's what we do here. We protect each other. We learn to defend ourselves. And we remember what this school is supposed to be." He pulled out his wand. "Tonight, we're focusing on stunning spells. Basic, practical, and they won't get you expelled for knowing them. Everyone pairs up. Experienced students work with newer ones." The room filled with movement as students organized themselves. Neville circulated, correcting wand grips, demonstrating the proper flick and jab motion, encouraging nervous first years. "Stupefy is about intent," he explained to a Ravenclaw second year, whose spell kept fizzling out. "You're not just saying words, you're putting force behind them. Think about what you're defending. Why do you need this spell to work?" The girl tried again, and this time her red bolt of light struck the practice dummy squarely in the chest. "Excellent," Neville said, and her face lit up with pride. He moved to the next pair, then the next, falling into the rhythm of teaching. This part he could do. This part made sense, helping students find their strength, watching their confidence grow, knowing he was giving them tools they might desperately need. It was when he looked up and saw 27 faces watching him with trust and hope that the weight became almost unbearable. The lesson was winding down, students practicing their stunning spells with increasing accuracy, when the door burst open. A Gryffindor third year named Colin Sutherland stumbled through, his robes torn and his face bleeding. "They've got Michael Corner," he gasped. "Caro caught him painting over the dark arts classroom door. He's being taken to the dungeons right now." The room went silent. Michael Corner was a sixth-year Ravenclaw, sharp-tongued and brave to the point of recklessness. He'd been one of the original DA members, and he'd been conducting a private war against the Carrows through increasingly bold acts of vandalism. "How long ago?" Ginny demanded. 5 minutes. I ran as fast as I could." Neville's mind raced. The magical map on the wall showed tiny figures moving. There, in the dungeon's corridor, 3 shapes converging. One of them would be Michael. The others would be Caro's. "We can't mount a rescue," Seamus said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Not from the dungeons. Not with both Caro's there. It's suicide." "We can't just leave him," Dennis protested. "We won't," Neville heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere he didn't quite recognize. "But Seamus is right. A direct rescue is impossible. We need to be smart." "What are you thinking?" Luna asked quietly. Neville studied the map, his mind working through possibilities. "Diversion. If we can create enough chaos somewhere else in the castle, draw the Carrows away from the dungeons, give Michael a chance to slip away through one of the portrait passages." "There's no portrait passage in the dungeon's detention rooms," Ginny interrupted. "We checked. Slytherin didn't trust portrait magic in his domain." "Then we improvise." Neville turned to face the group, seeing their fear, their determination, their desperate hope that he would have an answer. "Luna, you and half the group create diversions on the upper floors. Set off Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs if you have to. Make it impossible to ignore. Ginny, you take the other half and position yourselves along the route from the dungeons to the 7th floor. When Michael runs, and he will run because he's smart, you guide him through back corridors to safety." "And you?" Ginny asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. "I'm going to the dungeons. I'm going to walk right up to Caro and interrupt whatever he's planning." That's mental, Seamus said flatly. That's suicide, Hannah added. That's leadership, Luna said softly. Neville met her eyes and saw understanding there. This was the weight she'd been talking about, the responsibility of making choices that put yourself at risk to protect others. His father had made choices like this. His mother had made choices like this. Maybe he was more like them than he thought. I'm not going to fight Caro, Neville said. I'm going to report a dangerous magical creature in the Forbidden Forest. Something that requires immediate attention from Defense Against the Dark Arts faculty. I'm going to be the annoying, persistent student who won't shut up until he investigates. By the time he realizes it's a false alarm, Michael will be long gone. And if it doesn't work, Ernest asked. Then you'll rescue both of us, Neville said, managing a weak smile. But it'll work. It has to. The students dispersed quickly, moving with the efficiency they'd developed over weeks of coordinated operations. Luna pressed a galleon into Neville's hand. If you need emergency help, heat this. All our coins will warm. We'll come running. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be careful. She squeezed his shoulder once, then led her group toward the upper floors. Ginny lingered. Neville, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, you know the Caros are looking for an excuse to use the Cruciatus curse on students. They've been talking about enhanced discipline in the staff room. I heard McGonagall arguing against it. Neville had heard the same rumours. His hands were already sweating at the thought. But he couldn't let fear paralyse him. Not now, not with Michael Corner's life hanging in the balance. Then I'll survive it, he said quietly. My parents survived worse. Ginny's expression crumpled for just a moment, then hardened with determination. You're braver than you know. I'm terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Neville. It's doing what's right despite the fear. She gripped her wand. We'll be ready. Get Michael out. Get yourself out. She left, and Neville stood alone in the room of requirement for 3 heartbeats. The space had returned to its sanctuary configuration, hammocks swaying gently, the impossible windows showing peaceful moonlight over the grounds. It felt like a place worth fighting for. He thought of his parents in St. Mungo's, his mother's hand pressing a gum wrapper into his palm at every visit, her mind broken, but her love somehow still present. His father's vacant stare, the shell of a hero who'd sacrificed everything rather than betray his friends. You are not your father, his grandmother had written. Maybe not. But he could choose to be brave anyway. Neville left the room and headed for the dungeons. The corridor outside Amicus Caro's office was cold and damp, water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Neville could hear voices through the door, Caro's rough mockery, and Michael Corner's defiant responses. His heart hammered against his ribs. His palms were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to let someone else handle this. He raised his fist and knocked on the door. The voices inside stopped abruptly. The door swung open, revealing Amicus Caro's bulk silhouetted against a wandlight. Behind him, Michael Corner stood with his back against the wall, his face pale, but his chin raised in stubborn pride. Longbottom, Caro said, his smile spreading wide and cold. What an unexpected pleasure. Come to join your friend in detention? No, sir. Neville forced his voice steady. I came to report a dangerous situation. In the Forbidden Forest, I saw something from the astronomy tower. Looked like an acromantula, maybe. Larger. It was heading toward the edge of the forest, toward the castle. I thought the defense against the dark arts professor should know immediately. Caro's eyes narrowed. An acromantula. How convenient. I know what I saw, sir. Neville made himself meet the man's eyes, even as his legs trembled. It's probably nothing, but after what happened with Aragog a few years back, I thought. You thought you'd interrupt my discipline of this vandal with a tall tale about spiders. I thought I'd report a potential threat to the school. Isn't that what you're here for, sir? Defense against the dark arts? Neville kept his voice respectful, but persistent, channeling every annoying student who'd ever delayed a professor with excessive questions. Of course, if you'd rather I report to Professor McGonagall instead. You'll do no such thing. Caro stepped into the corridor, his wand pointed at Neville's chest. You think I don't know what you're doing, boy? You think I don't hear the whispers about Dumbledore's little army playing at rebellion? Neville's blood turned to ice, but he kept his expression confused, innocent. I don't know what you mean, sir. I just saw a spider. The curse hit him without warning. Pain exploded through every nerve ending. His bones felt like they were splintering. His skull like it was cracking open. His organs like they were being shredded from inside. He was dimly aware of falling to the stone floor, of his own screaming, of the world dissolving into nothing but agony. It lasted forever. It lasted seconds. When Caro lifted the curse, Neville lay gasping on the cold stone, his body twitching with aftershocks. He could taste blood. He'd bitten his tongue. Still think you saw a spider, Longbottom? Caro's voice came from very far away. Neville forced his head up, forced his eyes to focus. Through the doorway behind Caro, he could see Michael Corner's horrified expression, and behind Michael, the brief flash of a portrait frame swinging open in the wall. Michael saw it too. Their eyes met. Yes, sir, Neville whispered, his voice raw. In the forest, heading this way. Thought you should know. Caro raised his wand again, but a voice interrupted from down the corridor. Mr. Caro, there's an emergency on the 7th floor. Some kind of magical fire. Wildfire whiz-bangs or worse. Professor Snape requests your immediate assistance. It was Filch, his wheezing voice panicked. Caro swore viciously. He looked down at Neville, then at Michael, clearly torn between his desire to continue and the necessity of responding to his employer. This isn't over, he snarled, then turned and strode away, Filch scurrying after him. The moment they rounded the corner, Michael bolted through the portrait passage. Neville tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't support him. His whole body shook with the after effects of the Cruciatus curse. Neville! Ginny appeared from a side corridor with Hannah Abbott, Ernest. They hauled him to his feet, supporting his weight between them. Michael, he managed. Safe. Luna's group has him. We need to move. Caro will realize the fire was a diversion any minute. They half-carried him through back corridors, avoiding the main staircases. The castle seemed to help. Doors opening before they reached them, suits of armor shifting to block pursuing footsteps. By the time they reached the 7th floor and stumbled through into the room of requirement, Neville's legs had stopped working entirely. They laid him on a hammock. Luna appeared with Dittany and something that smelled like peppermint. Drink this. It'll help with the nerve pain. He drank, the potion burning down his throat, but immediately easing the worst of the tremors. Michael Corner crouched beside the hammock, his face stricken. "You took the Cruciatus curse for me. You're completely insane." "Worked, though, didn't it?" Neville's voice came out steadier than he felt. "Everything still hurts. A deep, bone-level ache that he suspected would last for days. But he was alive. They were all alive. You're also a bloody hero," Michael said roughly. "Thank you." Around them, students clustered, the 27 who'd been at the lesson, plus others who'd participated in the rescue. They looked at Neville with something new in their eyes, not just trust, not just hope, respect. He'd led them through a dangerous operation and brought everyone home safe. He'd put himself between a student and torture. He'd faced the thing that had destroyed his parents and survived it. Maybe his grandmother was right. Maybe he wasn't his father. But he was Neville Longbottom. And maybe, somehow, that was enough. "Everyone get some rest," he said quietly. "We'll debrief in the morning." As the student settled into hammocks and cushions, Luna sat beside him. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of Graphorns," Neville admitted. "But also proud. Is that wrong?" "We saved him, Luna. We actually saved him. It's not wrong. You're allowed to feel proud." She adjusted the blanket the room had provided. "You're also allowed to feel scared. Both things can be true." "I am scared," Neville confessed, "of what comes next, of leading these people, of letting them down." "Then you're the right person to lead them," Luna said simply. "The wrong person would be certain they couldn't fail. You know the stakes, you know the cost. That makes you careful, that makes you wise." Through the room's impossible windows, stars wheeled across an enchanted sky. In hammocks all around him, students who'd risked everything tonight slept safely. The castle hummed its approval through ancient stones. Neville closed his eyes and felt the weight of his wand, his father's wand, pressing against his side. Legacy and responsibility, fear and courage, pain and pride. He was not his father. But he was carrying on the fight his parents had started, in his own way, with his own strength. And, for tonight, that was enough. December arrived at Hogwarts with frost on the windows and ice coating the grounds. But Ginny Weasley barely noticed the cold. She had too much rage keeping her warm. She stood in the 5th floor corridor at 2 a.m, her wand illuminating a ministry propaganda poster. The image showed a stern-faced wizard beneath bold letters. "Mudbloods, register now. The ministry protects pure magical heritage." The wizard in the poster sneered down at her with practiced contempt. Ginny raised her wand and began to work. 10 minutes later, the poster had been transformed. The stern wizard now wore a ridiculous dunce cap. The text read, "Voldemort picks his nose. Even Dark Lords have boogers." Underneath, in smaller letters, "This message was brought to you by Dumbledore's army." It was juvenile. It was petty. It was exactly the kind of thing that would make the Carrows apoplectic with fury. Ginny felt the smallest flicker of satisfaction as she tucked her wand away and headed for the next poster. Behind her, through a portrait passage, Lavender Brown kept watch with the magical map Luna had created. They'd been defacing propaganda for 2 hours now, hitting corridors throughout the castle. Tomorrow morning, students will see their work. They'd laugh. They'd remember that resistance was possible. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Ginny, we should head back," Lavender whispered through the portrait of a sleeping shepherdess. "Patrols change in 20 minutes. "One more," Ginny said. "There's a poster near the dungeons that says Muggleborns are magically inferior. I want that one gone. Ginny, I said one more. She heard the snap in her own voice and felt immediately guilty. Lavender was risking detention, or worse, to help her. She didn't deserve Ginny's temper. But the rage sat hot and tight in Ginny's chest, burning like dragon fire, and she didn't know how to let it out except through small, mostly meaningless acts of vandalism. Harry was hunting Horcruxes. Ron and Hermione were helping him save the wizarding world, and Ginny was stuck at Hogwarts, painting moustaches on propaganda posters. She made her way to the dungeon's corridor, moving quietly through the shadows. The castle was cooperative tonight, staircases holding steady, suits of armour remaining silent. Even Peeves, glimpsed briefly on the 4th floor, had given her a jaunty salute and floated away without causing chaos. The poster near Snape's office was larger than the others, more official. It showed a family tree with pure magical bloodlines highlighted in gold, while Muggle-born branches appeared withered and dark. The message was clear. Some magic was worth more than others. Ginny thought of Hermione, brilliant, brave Hermione, who'd probably saved Harry's life a dozen times over by now. Hermione, whose magical ability put most purebloods to shame. She raised her wand. "Impressive dedication," a cold voice said behind her. Ginny spun, her heart lurching. Severus Snape stood in the shadows of his office doorway, his black robes making him nearly invisible against the dark stone. His expression was unreadable. "Headmaster," Ginny said, forcing her voice steady, even as her mind raced through possible escape routes. The nearest portrait passage was 30 feet away. She'd never make it. "Miss Weasley, out of bed at—" Snape pulled out a pocket watch. 2:47 in the morning, attempting to vandalize ministry-approved educational materials. How disappointingly predictable. Ginny lifted her chin. If she was going to be expelled, or cursed, or worse, she'd at least go down fighting. They're lies. That poster is nothing but blood supremacist propaganda dressed up as education. Indeed. Snape stepped closer, his dark eyes studying her. And you believe defacing them accomplishes what, precisely? Do you imagine the ministry will see your handiwork and reconsider their policies? Will the Carrows suddenly become enlightened by your artistic commentary? It shows students they don't have to accept it. It shows them that someone's still fighting. It shows them you're a foolish child playing at rebellion without understanding the consequences. His voice remained soft, but something in it made Ginny's skin prickle. The Carrows have been hoping for an excuse to implement harsher punishments. You're handing them exactly what they want. So I should just accept it, let them spread their poison without resistance. Snape's expression shifted. Just for a moment, something complicated flickered across his face. I'm saying there are ways to resist that don't involve making yourself a martyr. Your brother and Mr. Potter didn't leave you behind so you could throw yourself on the Carrows' wands at the first opportunity. The mention of Harry hit like a physical blow. Ginny felt her composure crack. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking now. "Don't you dare talk about Harry like you know what he—" "I know more than you imagine, Miss Weasley." Snape cut her off. "I also know that reckless actions born of frustration help no one. If you're going to fight, fight intelligently. Otherwise, you're simply indulging your temper while putting your fellow students at risk." He stepped back toward his office door. "Go back to your dormitory. I will pretend this conversation never happened. And Miss Weasley, next time I find you out of bed, I will not be so lenient. The Carrows are watching for infractions. Do not give them ammunition." He disappeared into his office, the door closing with a soft click. Ginny stood frozen, her wand still raised, her mind reeling. Had Snape just let her go? Had he actually given her advice? Lavender's urgent whisper echoed through the portrait passage. "Ginny, Filch is coming. Move." Ginny ran. She made it back to the room of requirement, with her heart still pounding and her thoughts in chaos. The space had configured itself for nighttime. Hammocks, swaying gently, the magical windows showing a peaceful snowfall over the grounds. A dozen students slept in various corners, finding safety here when their own dormitories felt too dangerous. Neville sat by one of the windows, clearly unable to sleep. The scar from Amicus Carrow's cutting curse stood out pale against his jaw in the dim light. He'd healed, physically, but Ginny had noticed the way he sometimes flinched at sudden movements now, the way his hand would drift to his wand in quiet moments. "How'd it go?" he asked quietly. "We got 15 posters. Ginny sank down beside him, suddenly exhausted. "Snape caught me on the last one." Neville's eyes widened. "What happened?" "He let me go. Gave me a lecture about fighting intelligently instead of recklessly." Ginny stared out at the enchanted snow. "I don't understand him. He's working for you-know-who. He killed Dumbledore. But tonight, he could have handed me to the Carrows, and he didn't." "McGonagall thinks he's playing both sides," Neville said, "protecting students when he can, while maintaining his position with the Death Eaters. But I don't know if I believe that." "Neither do I." Ginny wrapped her arms around her knees. "I keep thinking about what he said, about fighting intelligently, about not throwing myself on the Carrows' wands." "He's not wrong," Neville said gently. "You've been taking bigger risks every week. The poster defacement. The supplies are stolen from the potion stores. Last week you hexed that 6th-year Slytherin who was tormenting a 1st year. He deserved it. Maybe, but you almost got caught. And if you get expelled or seriously hurt, who leads the operations you're so good at coordinating?" Neville's voice was soft but firm. "We need you, Ginny. But we need you to be smart and safe, not brave and expelled." The words stung because they echoed what Snape had said, and because deep down, Ginny knew they were true. She'd been pushing harder every week, taking unnecessary risks, letting her frustration drive her into increasingly dangerous situations. "I just feel so useless," she admitted quietly. "Harry's out there hunting Horcruxes. Bill and Fleur are hiding Muggleborns. Charlie's working with the Order. Even Percy, bloody Percy, has gone underground to feed the Order information. And I'm here, painting silly messages on posters." "You're here protecting students who'd be tortured without the DA," Neville corrected. "You're here organizing rescues. You're here showing first years that they don't have to be afraid all the time." He paused. "That's not useless, Ginny. That's vital. But it's not enough. It's never enough." Neville was quiet for a moment. "My Gran sent me a letter last week, told me I'm not my father, that I'm not required to be a hero." "What did you say?" "Nothing yet, because I'm trying to figure out if she's right." He touched the scar on his jaw absently. "I'm not Frank Longbottom. I'll never be the Auror he was. But maybe I'm not supposed to be. Maybe I'm supposed to be something else, someone who protects people in different ways." Ginny looked at her friend, quiet, steady Neville, who'd grown into leadership without anyone quite noticing. "You're already a hero. You took the Cruciatus curse to save Michael Corner. and you organize the rescue that saved us both. See? We work better together. You bring the fire, I bring the caution, Luna brings creativity. Neville smiled slightly. We balance each other out. I still want to do more. Then let's do more, but let's do it smart. Neville stood, offering her his hand. Come on, I have an idea, but I need your expertise in creative destruction. The idea, it turned out, involved Snape's office. You want to steal what? Ginny asked, staring at Neville like he'd grown a second head. Not steal, liberate. They were gathered in a corner of the Room of Requirement. Neville, Ginny, Luna, Seamus, and the Patel twins. On the magical map, they could see Snape's office standing empty, the headmaster currently patrolling the 4th floor. The Carrows have been confiscating wands from students they deem problematic. Muggleborns, mostly. They're keeping them locked in Snape's office. 17 wands at last count, Luna added. She'd somehow gotten this information from the portraits, who seemed to tell her everything. Students trying to defend themselves without wands. It's cruel. So we break in, grab the wands, return them to their owners, Neville continued. But we need to be fast, and we need to be smart. Ginny, you know more about Snape's office defences than anyone. You've been there for detention enough times. It was true. Ginny had accumulated quite a collection of detentions over the past months for various infractions. She'd used the time to study Snape's security measures. There's a password-protected lock on the door, she said, mind already working through the problem. But I watched Snape open it once. The wand movement is a counterclockwise spiral with a double tap at the end. The password changes weekly, but it's always a potion's ingredient. Last week, it was Asphodel. Can you guess this week's? Parvati asked. I can try several. The lock allows 3 attempts before triggering an alarm. Ginny studied the map. We'd need a diversion to cover the alarm if I get it wrong. Something that would make noise somewhere else in the castle. Peeves, Luna said simply. He's been very cooperative lately. I think he misses Fred and George. Of course, Luna had somehow befriended the castle's most chaotic poltergeist. All right, Neville said. Here's the plan. Luna coordinates with Peeves for backup noise. Ginny and I go to Snape's office. The rest of you position yourselves along escape routes with the map, ready to redirect us if patrols shift. We get in, grab the wands, get out. 10 minutes, maximum. And if we run into Snape, Ginny asked, then we run very fast in opposite directions and hope the castle helps us. It wasn't a great plan, but sitting around doing nothing wasn't an option anymore. And this was something concrete, something that would actually help students defend themselves. When? Seamus asked. Neville checked the map. Now. While Snape's on the 4th floor and the Carrows are in their quarters, we won't get a better window. They moved quickly, each person taking their position. Luna disappeared to find Peeves. Seamus and the Patel stationed themselves at key corridor junctions with copies of the map Luna had somehow duplicated. Ginny and Neville made their way through portrait passages toward the dungeons. The castle felt alert tonight, watching, waiting. Portraits murmured encouragement as they passed. A suit of armor shifted slightly to better hide them from a distant patrol. Even the torches seemed to burn brighter, lighting their way. The castle's on our side, Ginny whispered. Always has been, Neville replied. It remembers what Hogwarts is supposed to be. They emerged from a portrait passage 2 corridors away from Snape's office. Ginny's heart hammered as they approached the door. Heavy oak, carved with protective runes that pulsed with faint silver light. 3 chances, she muttered, raising her wand to the lock. She made the counterclockwise spiral, double tap. Wolfsbane. The lock didn't budge. Belladonna. Still nothing. 1 more chance. Ginny closed her eyes, thinking through potion's ingredients. What would Snape use? Something obscure enough to be secure, but simple enough to remember. Wormwood. The lock clicked open. Brilliant, Neville breathed. They slipped inside. Snape's office was exactly as Ginny remembered. Shelves of books, jars of pickled things she preferred not to examine closely, and a large desk with multiple locked drawers. Behind the desk hung a portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black, currently snoring in his frame. The wands should be in the top right drawer, Ginny said, moving quickly to the desk. Snape locked them there during my last detention. But when she tried the drawer, it wouldn't open. A different lock, requiring a different password. Damn, she hissed. I don't know this one. Let me try, Neville said. He studied the lock, then pulled out a small vial of something that looked like acid. Bubatuba pus, Luna's idea, should dissolve minor enchantments. He applied 3 drops. The lock sizzled, sparked, and clicked open. Inside lay 17 wands, arranged in neat rows. Different woods, different cores, each one representing a student stripped of their ability to defend themselves. Ginny felt the rage flare again, but this time it was focused, purposeful. This was why she fought. Not for glory or recognition, but for moments like this, for giving vulnerable students their power back. Got them, she said, carefully gathering the wands into a charmed bag Luna had provided. Let's... Well, well, a silky voice said from the doorway. Breaking. And entering. How delightfully felonious. Amicus Carrow stood blocking their exit, his wand raised and his smile vicious. Ginny's mind raced. They were trapped. The portrait passage was on the opposite wall. Carrow was between them and the door, and any moment now he'd call for backup. But before she could move, before she could even raise her wand, the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black suddenly woke with a tremendous shout. Intruders! Thieves! Someone stealing Snape's research! 3rd floor corridor, hurry! Carrow's head whipped toward the portrait in confusion. What? The 3rd floor? But... In the moment of distraction, Neville grabbed Ginny's arm and ran. Not toward the door, but toward a painting of a bowl of fruit on the side wall. He tickled the paw. It giggled and transformed into a doorknob. They tumbled through into the Hogwarts kitchens. House elves scattered in surprise. Dobby, loyal, wonderful Dobby, immediately understood. This way, he squeaked, pointing to a back exit. Dobby helps Harry Potter's friends. They ran through the kitchens, past startled elves and bubbling cauldrons, and emerged in a corridor 3 floors away from Snape's office. Behind them, they could hear Carrow's furious shouts. The portrait lied for us, Ginny gasped as they ran. Phineas Nigellus Black lied to a Death Eater to help us escape. The portraits remember Dumbledore, Neville said, pulling her through another passage. They know which side they're on. They made it back to the room of requirement just as Peeves began a spectacular display of chaos on the 7th floor. Suits of armour dancing, paintings singing bawdy songs at top volume, water flooding from a bathroom. The perfect cover for their arrival. Inside the room, Luna waited with the other students. Ginny pulled out the charmed bag and carefully laid the 17 wands on the table. We did it, she said, hardly believing it. We actually did it. Luna smiled her dreamy smile. Of course we did. The castle wanted us to succeed. Over the next hour, they returned each wand to its owner. The looks on those students' faces, relief, gratitude, renewed hope, made every risk worthwhile. A muggle-born 4th year named Sophie held her wand with trembling hands. I thought I'd never get it back. I thought I'd have to go through the rest of the year defenseless. Not any more, Ginny said. And if they take it again, we'll get it back again. That's a promise. Later, when the students had dispersed, and the room had settled into its nighttime configuration, Ginny sat by the windows with Neville and Luna. Snape's going to know it was us, she said quietly. Probably, Neville agreed, but he can't prove it. And even if he could, he let you go tonight, Luna finished, when he could have turned you over to Caro. I think he's playing a deeper game than we understand. Ginny thought about Snape's words. Fight intelligently. Don't throw yourself on the Caro's wands. Maybe he had been trying to help in his twisted way. I'm still angry, she said, about Harry being gone, about being stuck here, about all of it. Anger's not bad, Neville said, as long as you use it. Tonight you used it to help 17 students. That's better than defacing 100 posters. He was right. The poster vandalism had been about venting her frustration. This, returning stolen wands, protecting vulnerable students, building an actual resistance. This was about making a difference. All right, Ginny said. Smart resistance, strategic operations, fighting intelligently. She looked at her friends. But I'm keeping the poster defacement. Some things are just good for morale. Luna laughed, soft and musical. Voldemort does pick his nose, after all. The people deserve to know. Through the enchanted windows, snow continued to fall over Hogwarts grounds. Somewhere in the castle, Amicus Caro raged about the theft. Somewhere in Britain, Harry hunted Horcruxes. And here, in a secret room on the 7th floor, 3 students planned their next move in a war that would define their generation. Ginny felt the rage still burning in her chest. But now it burned clean and purposeful, like dragonfire forged into a weapon. She wasn't Harry Potter leading the charge against Voldemort. But she was Ginny Weasley, and she had her own war to fight. And she was done apologizing for the fire inside her. Luna Lovegood had always noticed things other people missed. The way the staircases hummed, different notes depending on their mood. The pattern of cracks in the ceiling of the Ravenclaw common room that looked like a crumple-horned snorkack if you tilted your head just right. The fact that the suits of armor on the 3rd floor shifted positions every Tuesday, as if they were playing an extremely slow game of chess with each other. Today, she noticed that the castle was trying to tell her something. It started with the portraits. Luna was making her way to the room of requirement through the usual route, past Barnabas the Balmy, through the alcove where a portrait of a medieval herb garden hung, when the painted botanist leaned out of her frame. "Child," she said urgently, "the castle whispers, something approaches." Luna paused. What sort of something? The dark kind, the searching kind. The botanist glanced nervously over her shoulder, as if someone might overhear even in her painted world. The Caros are planning inspections, looking for contraband, they say. But really, they're looking for you. For me specifically. For the resistance. For the room that shouldn't exist but does. For the students who keep disappearing from punishments. The botanist's painted eyes were earnest. The castle has hidden you well, But they're becoming suspicious. Be careful, dear child. Even Hogwarts has limits to what it can conceal." Luna thanked her and continued on, her mind turning over this new information. She'd known their activities would eventually draw serious attention. 17 stolen wands had made Snape's eyes narrow dangerously during breakfast yesterday, even if he'd said nothing. But she hadn't expected the Carrows to mount an actual search. The room of requirement would protect itself, of course. It always had. But the students currently sheltering inside, 23 at last count, including several Muggleborns who no longer felt safe in their own dormitories, would be vulnerable if caught outside the room during an inspection. She needed to warn everyone. I needed to coordinate, needed to think several steps ahead, the way her father did when tracking creatures through the forest. Luna pulled out her galleon and heated it with her wand, sending the emergency signal. Within minutes, the core group would gather. But as she approached the blank wall where the room's entrance should appear, Luna noticed something else, something that made her stop and truly look. The wall was shimmering, not obviously, not in a way most people would notice. But Luna had spent months studying the room's magic, and she could see it now, tiny ripples in the stone, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The room was working harder than usual to maintain its concealment. "You're struggling," Luna said softly, pressing her palm against the wall. "Too many people inside, too much magic being used. You're magnificent, but even you have limits." The wall pulsed once under her hand, almost like a heartbeat. Luna closed her eyes and thought very clearly. "We need to meet. We need to plan. We need to keep everyone safe." The door materialized, and she slipped inside. The room had configured itself into something new, a hybrid space that served as both sanctuary and war room. Hammocks still hung in the corners for the students who lived here now, but the center had been transformed into a planning area. The magical map dominated one wall, showing real-time movements throughout the castle. Books on defensive magic, concealment charms, and guerrilla tactics were stacked on tables. And along the far wall, Luna's latest project was taking shape. A communication network that went beyond simple galleon signals. Neville arrived first, followed quickly by Ginny, Seamus, and the Pattle twins. Others trickled in through various portrait passages. Michael Corner, Hannah Abbott, Ernest Macmillan, Lavender Brown. Within 15 minutes, the core group of 32 students had assembled. Luna noticed the way they moved now. Confident, purposeful, nothing like the frightened children who'd first stumbled into this space months ago. They'd become something more, something dangerous to the Carrows' reign. "The Carrows are planning inspections," Luna announced without preamble. "Searching for contraband and for us. The portraits say it's happening soon, possibly within days." Worried murmurs rippled through the group. "They can't find the room," Ginny said. "It's unplottable, protected by magic older than—" "The room is struggling," Luna interrupted gently. "I can see it on the walls. Too many people, too much magical activity. It's working harder than it should to stay hidden. And if the Carrows bring curse breakers or dark detection spells—" She didn't need to finish. They all understood. No magic was truly impenetrable. "So what do we do?" Neville asked. "We can't send the Muggleborns back to their dormitories. Some of them have nowhere else safe to go." Luna had been thinking about this all morning. "We need to divide our resources. The room is our headquarters, but we need safe houses throughout the castle. smaller spaces that can shelter 2 or 3 students each. Distributed protection instead of one large target. Where? Michael asked. Every room in Hogwarts is on a map somewhere. They'll check them all. Not every room. Luna smiled, thinking of all the strange spaces she'd discovered over the years. Hogwarts has pockets, places that exist between the official rooms, the tower where the frog choir rehearses, but no one can remember how to reach, the storage cupboard on the 4th floor that's bigger on the inside than outside, the bathroom moaning myrtle haunts that no one uses anymore. There's also the passage behind the mirror in the prefect's bathroom, Ginny added, catching on, and that weird alcove near the astronomy tower where time moves slower. Exactly. Luna moved to the magical map. We create a network, small safe houses connected by portrait passages. If one is discovered, the others remain secure, and we use the room primarily for meetings and planning, not as permanent shelter. Neville studied the map thoughtfully. It would require a lot more coordination, more risk every time someone moves between locations. But it's safer overall, Parvati said. Distributed risk instead of concentrated vulnerability. We'd need supplies at each location, Hannah pointed out. Food, water, healing potions, blankets. The house elves can help with that, Luna said. She developed an excellent rapport with the kitchen staff, particularly Dobby, who seemed to consider helping the DA a sacred duty. They can deliver to multiple locations as easily as one. Seamus frowned. But how do we communicate between safe houses? The galleons work for calling meetings, but for day-to-day coordination. Luna had been waiting for this question. She walked to her project wall and pulled aside a cloth, revealing a dozen small mirrors, not much larger than her palm, each one enchanted to shimmer with a faint silver light. 2-way mirrors, she said, based on the ones Sirius Black and James Potter used to use. I've been working on them for weeks. Each mirror is paired with a master mirror that I'll keep here. Anyone in a safe house can call the master mirror and communicate. We can coordinate movements, warn of patrols, and request supplies. The group stared at the mirrors with something like awe. Luna, this is brilliant, Neville said quietly. How did you even... The library has books on mirror magic, if you know where to look. And my mother experimented with communication spells before. Luna's voice trailed off. Before the spell had gone wrong. Before her mother had died. Ginny squeezed her shoulder gently. The point is, Luna continued, we have the tools to create a distributed network. We just need to implement it before the inspections begin. Then we start now, Neville decided. He'd grown into his leadership role over the past months, and Luna could see the determination in his eyes. We scout the safe houses today, set up supplies and mirrors by tomorrow, move the Muggleborns to their new locations by the weekend, and we all learn the portrait passages that connect everything. The group dispersed with purpose, each person taking on specific tasks. Luna found herself paired with Ginny to scout potential locations in the castle's upper levels. They moved through portrait passages, Luna leading with the confidence of someone who'd spent years exploring Hogwarts' hidden spaces. Ginny followed, occasionally consulting the magical map to track patrol patterns. You amaze me sometimes, Ginny said as they emerged behind a tapestry on the 6th floor. All of this, the mirrors, the communication network, understanding how the room's magic works, you make it look effortless. It's not effortless, Luna replied. It's just about paying attention, The castle tells you its secrets if you listen properly. They found a perfect safe house in an abandoned classroom near the Ravenclaw Tower, officially listed as a storage space on school records, but actually a comfortable room with intact furniture and windows that overlooked the Forbidden Forest. The space felt warm despite being unused, as if the castle itself was trying to make it welcoming. "This one," Luna said, running her fingers over a dusty desk. "2 students could live here comfortably, close enough to the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor towers that they wouldn't be obviously out of place if spotted in nearby corridors." Ginny marked it on their copy of the map. "That's 4 locations secured. How many more do we need?" "At least 6 more. Enough to shelter all 23 students currently in the room, plus space for emergencies." They continued their search, climbing narrow staircases and squeezing through tight passages. In a tower Luna had never noticed before, accessible only through a portrait of a sleeping dragon who had to be tickled awake. They found an entire apartment-like space with bedroom, bathroom, and even a small kitchenette. "How does this even exist?" Ginny wondered, staring around in amazement. "Hogwarts has been here for 1,000 years, Luna said. "Students and professors have been adding spaces, expanding magic, leaving their marks. The castle grows. It remembers. It adapts." She smiled. "It's alive in ways most people don't understand." They were marking their 5th location when Luna felt it. A subtle shift in the castle's atmosphere, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air grew heavy. "Something's wrong," she said. Ginny had her wand out instantly. "What's wrong?" Luna closed her eyes, trying to sense what the castle was telling her. The stones hummed with tension, the portraits were whispering urgently, and somewhere below them magical wards were being activated, dark, searching wards that felt invasive and wrong. "The inspection," Luna breathed. "It's happening now. They're starting in the dungeons and working their way up." They ran. The portrait passages blurred as they raced toward the 7th floor, Luna's heart pounding. They needed to warn the others, needed to get students into the safe houses before the Carrow's dark detection spells reached the upper levels. But when they burst into the room of requirement, Luna's worst fear was confirmed. The room was flickering. Students huddled in clusters, their faces frightened. The walls shimmered in and out of solidity. The magical map sparked and stuttered. Even the hammocks looked translucent, as if the room was struggling to maintain its own existence. Neville stood at the center, his wand raised, his face pale. "It started 5 minutes ago. The room's fighting something, some kind of revealing spell the Carrows are using." Luna could feel it now. Dark magic probing the castle's secrets, trying to force hidden spaces to reveal themselves. And the room, for all its power, was straining under the assault. "We need to evacuate," she said. "Now! Get everyone into the portrait passages and distribute them to the safe houses we've prepared." "But we've only set up 5 locations," Lavender protested. "We have 23 students here." "Then we crowd them in, 4 or 5 per location if we have to." Luna pulled out the master mirror and the list of safe house locations. "Neville, you take the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff students to the 4 closest safe houses. Ginny, organize the Ravenclaws. I'll stay here with the mirrors and coordinate the evacuation." "Luna, if the room collapses," Neville started, "it won't collapse with me still inside it. I'll be the anchor point. I'll hold it stable while everyone else gets out." It wasn't bravado. Luna could feel the room's magic resonating with her own. They'd developed a strange connection over the months of working together, of learning its quirks and patterns. If anyone could help it maintain stability, she could. "That's insane," Ginny said. "That's necessary," Luna corrected gently. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." They didn't have time to argue. The room flickered again, more violently this time. Books tumbled from shelves, a hammock dissolved into smoke and reformed a moment later. The evacuation was controlled chaos. Students grabbed essential supplies and fled through different portrait passages, guided by those who knew the routes. Neville led groups toward the safe houses near Gryffindor Tower. Ginny shepherded Ravenclaws toward the abandoned classroom they'd just scouted. Seamus and the Pattles took others to the various hiding spots throughout the castle. Within 10 minutes, the room was empty, except for Luna and the essential equipment, the magical map, the mirrors, the books on defensive magic they couldn't afford to lose. The walls were translucent now. Luna could see through them to the corridor beyond, where portraits watched with worried expressions. The room was losing its battle against the dark detection spell. Luna sat cross-legged in the center of the fading space and placed her hands flat on the floor. "I'm here," she said softly to the castle, to the room, to the ancient magic that had protected them for so long. "I'm not leaving you. We've been through too much together." The room pulsed around her. Gratitude, recognition, desperate effort. Luna closed her eyes and reached out with her own magic, the way her mother had taught her before the accident. Magic wasn't just about wand movements and incantations. It was about connection, about will and intent, and the spaces between thoughts where power lived. She felt the room's magic, wild and ancient and stubborn. Felt the dark detection spell pressing against it like oil sliding over water, trying to find cracks and weaknesses. Felt the castle itself straining to protect this space that had sheltered so many students over the centuries. Luna added her own magic to the mix. Not much, nothing like the vast power the room commanded, but enough to reinforce, to stabilize, to remind the room what it was fighting for. Images flickered through her mind. Neville teaching stunning spells with shaking hands. Ginny organizes rescues with fierce determination. Hannah Abbott sleeping safely for the first time in weeks. Dennis Creevy laughing at something Seamus said. Michael Corner reading quietly in a hammock, healing from trauma. 23 students found sanctuary where nowhere else was safe. This matters, Luna thought fiercely. We matter. You've been protecting students for 1,000 years, and you're not going to stop now. The room solidified around her. The walls stopped flickering. The magical map stabilized. The mirrors gleamed with steady silver light. And somewhere below, Luna felt the dark detection spell slide away, finding nothing, moving on to search other parts of the castle. The room had won. Luna opened her eyes and found herself lying on the floor, exhausted, but triumphant. The space had returned to full solidity, though it felt different now, smaller, more focused, as if it had learned from the attack and adapted. One of the mirrors chimed softly. Luna picked it up and saw Neville's worried face. "Luna, are you all right? The room is fine," Luna assured him. "We held. Everyone's safe." All distributed to safe houses. No one was caught during the evacuation. Relief flooded Neville's features. What happened? The map showed the inspection. Spell passing right through the 7th floor, but it didn't detect anything. The room protected itself, with a little help. Luna sat up slowly, still feeling drained. But Neville, we can't keep everyone in the safe houses indefinitely. Some of them barely have space for sleeping, let alone living. I know. We'll figure something out. Neville paused. Luna, what you did, staying behind, anchoring the room, that was incredibly brave and incredibly reckless. Sometimes those are the same thing, Luna said with a slight smile. Over the next hour, she coordinated through the mirrors as students settled into their new temporary homes. The system worked better than she'd hoped. Each safe house checking in, reporting conditions, requesting supplies that Dobby and the other house elves happily provided. But as night fell, and Luna sat alone in the now quiet room of requirement, she felt the weight of what they'd accomplished, and what still lay ahead. They'd survived today's inspection, but there would be others. The Carrows were growing more aggressive, more determined to root out resistance. And while the distributed network was safer, it was also more complex. More chances for someone to be caught, more coordination required, more variables to manage. The door opened, and Luna wasn't surprised to see it was Ginny. Thought you might want company, Ginny said, settling beside her. Also, Neville's worried you pushed yourself too hard, holding the room stable. I'm all right, just tired. You're always just tired after doing something extraordinary. Ginny pulled out 2 chocolate frogs and handed one to Luna. Here, sugar helps with magical exhaustion. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the enchanted windows show stars wheeling across a peaceful sky. Outside this room, the castle seethed with dark magic and cruel enforcement. But here, in this space they'd defended and adapted and made their own, there was still peace. Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? Ginny asked quietly. All the risk, all the danger, for what sometimes feels like such small victories. Luna thought about Hannah's smile when she felt safe enough to sleep. About Dennis learning to cast a proper shield charm. About the Muggle-born first year who'd hugged her yesterday and whispered thank you with tears in her eyes. Every single day it's worth it, Luna said. Small victories add up. We're teaching the castle how to be Hogwarts again, how to protect students, how to nurture learning, how to choose love over fear. That's not small. That's everything. Ginny leaned her head on Luna's shoulder. How do you stay so certain, so calm? I'm not always calm. Sometimes I'm terrified. Luna gazed at the stars. But I learned something from my mother before she died. She was experimenting with a spell, trying to create something beautiful and new. It went wrong, and the magic consumed her. But in her last moments, she wasn't afraid. She was still curious, still reaching for understanding. Luna's voice grew soft. Magic is alive. It has moods and intentions. The room is alive. Hogwarts is alive. And living things want to protect what they love. So I trust that. I trust the castle's love for its students. I trust our love for each other. And I trust that love is stronger than the Carrows' cruelty. That's very Ravenclaw of you, Ginny said with a slight smile. Finding wisdom in tragedy. That's very Gryffindor of you, Luna countered. Stay beside me, even though you're exhausted too. They sat together as the night deepened. 2 girls holding the line against darkness, with nothing but determination and friendship, and a castle that remembered what it meant to be home. Outside, patrols continued. The Carrows plotted. Snape maintained his complicated balance. and somewhere in Britain Harry hunted Horcruxes that might save or doom them all. But here, in a secret room on the 7th floor, Luna Lovegood kept the light burning, small and steady, and absolutely refusing to go out. March arrived with cold rain that lashed the castle windows and turned the grounds into a muddy mess. Neville stood at one of the Room of Requirement's enchanted windows, watching water stream down invisible glass, and thought that the weather matched his mood perfectly, bleak, relentless, and showing no signs of improvement. Behind him, the room buzzed with quiet activity. Luna sat in the corner calibrating her two-way mirrors, making minute adjustments to ensure clear communication with all 7 safe houses now scattered throughout the castle. Ginny paced the length of the magical map, tracking patrol patterns and muttering about exploitable gaps in coverage. 20 students occupied various corners of the space, some studying, some practicing spells, some simply existing in one of the few places that still felt safe. 3 months. They'd been running this resistance for 3 months now. 3 months of rescues and defiance and living on the knife's edge of discovery. 3 months, and the Carrows were winning anyway. Neville touched his jaw where the scar from Amicus's cutting curse still ached in cold weather. It wasn't the only mark the Carrows had left. Last week, a 5th-year Hufflepuff named Marcus had spent 2 days recovering in one of the safe houses after Alecto's enhanced interrogation about Muggle-born hiding spots. The week before, twin first-years had arrived at the room in tears after being forced to practice Cruciatus on rats in defense against the dark arts. They saved who they could. They protected who they could. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Neville," Luna called softly. "Mirror call from Safe House 4? They need more healing supplies." Neville crossed to her, pushing his dark thoughts aside. What happened? Luna's expression was troubled. Thomas Whitby tried to return to his dormitory this morning, wanted to retrieve some personal belongings. Alecto Carrow caught him in the corridor and asked why he hadn't been attending Muggle studies. "Merlin," Neville breathed. Thomas was a Muggle-born 3rd year who'd been living in the safe houses for a month. Is he bruised but alive? Hannah's with him now. But Neville, this is the 3rd time this week someone's been caught outside the safe houses. The students are getting restless. They miss their belongings, their routines, their friends who aren't part of the DA. I know. Neville rubbed his face tiredly. I know. But what's the alternative? Send them back to dormitories where the Carrows can find them? There has to be a middle ground, Ginny said, joining them. She looked as exhausted as Neville felt, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a careless knot. We can't keep running a resistance and a refugee camp simultaneously. We don't have the resources. Then we find more resources, Neville said, hearing the snap in his own voice and hating it. We adapt. We figured it out. How? Ginny demanded. We're 17 years old, Neville. We're children playing at war, and people are getting hurt because we can't. Don't. Neville's hands clenched into fists. Don't say we're just children. Don't diminish what we're doing here. We've saved lives. I'm not diminishing anything. Ginny's voice rose. I'm saying we're stretched too thin. We're trying to shelter 23 students, run rescue operations, teach defensive magic, coordinate 7 safe houses, and somehow keep everyone fed and safe and sane. Something's going to break, Neville, and when it does, people are going to die. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at them now. this argument playing out in front of the students who depended on their leadership. Luna stood and gently guided them both toward a quieter corner. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," she suggested. But before they could move, one of the mirrors chimed urgently. Luna grabbed it, and Neville saw Seamus's face, pale and frightened. "Emergency," Seamus said without preamble. "Carrow's just announced a new policy. All Muggleborns are required to report to the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom tomorrow morning for registration and protection. Anyone who doesn't show up will be assumed to be harboring anti-ministry sympathies. Their families will be investigated." Neville's stomach dropped. "That's a trap. They're using the Muggleborns' families as leverage to force them out of hiding." "I know," Seamus said grimly. "Word's spreading fast. The Muggleborns in the safe houses are panicking. Some are talking about turning themselves in to protect their families." "We can't let them do that," Ginny said immediately. "The Carrows will—" "Will what?" A new voice interrupted. Michael Corner stepped forward, his expression angry. "Torture us? They're already doing that. At least if we turn ourselves in, our families might be safe." "Your families are already in danger," Neville said, trying to keep his voice calm and rational, even as his mind raced. "The Ministry's been rounding up Muggleborns for months. This registration is just a way to identify who's been hiding and who's been helping them hide." "So what do we do?" demanded a Ravenclaw fourth year named Catherine, one of the Muggleborns currently sheltering in Safe House 6. "Let our parents get arrested. Let our siblings get questioned by Death Eaters." "We protect you," Neville said. "That's what we've been doing all along. That's what we'll continue." "Protected." Michael laughed bitterly. "Thomas got caught this morning. Marcus spent 2 days unconscious after Electo's interrogation. We're not protected, Neville. We're just slowly being hunted down while you play general with your little army." The words hit like physical blows. Neville opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "That's not fair," Hannah said quietly from the corner where she'd been tending to another student's scraped knees. "Neville's been risking his life. And so have we," Michael's voice cracked. "Every single day we risk our lives just existing. At least if we turn ourselves in, we can try to negotiate, try to protect our families, try to—" "Die," Luna said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was gazing at Michael with her usual dreamy expression, but her voice carried absolute certainty. "You'll die, Michael. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. The Carrows aren't interested in registration. They're interested in elimination. And they'll start with the most vulnerable." "You don't know that," Catherine protested. "I do." Luna's protuberant eyes were sad. "My mother died experimenting with magic because she wanted to understand it better. She was curious until the very end. I've inherited that curiosity. So I've been reading everything I can about the last war, about how the Death Eaters operated. They don't negotiate with Muggleborns. They don't register them for protection. They eliminate threats and terrorize the rest into submission." The room fell silent, except for the sound of rain against the enchanted windows. "So what do we do?" Catherine asked again, but this time her voice was small and frightened. Neville looked at the faces turned toward him, students who'd trusted him to keep them safe, who'd believed in the resistance he'd helped build. He saw their fear, their exhaustion, their desperate hope, that he had an answer. He didn't have an answer. The weight of leadership, which had felt almost manageable when they were conducting daring rescues and teaching stunning spells, now felt crushing. These were lives, real lives, and his decisions, or failures, would determine who survived and who didn't. "I don't know," he admitted, and the confession felt like defeat. "I don't know how to protect your families and keep you safe. I don't know how to fight the entire ministry. I'm just trying to do what's right, what Harry would do." "Harry's not here," Michael said, not unkindly. "You are. And we need a real plan, Neville, not just hope and good intentions." Neville turned away, staring at the magical map without really seeing it. The tiny figures moved through their corridors, Carrows patrolling, students scurrying to classes, McGonagall maintaining her rounds with grim determination. A whole castle full of people just trying to survive. "We need help," Ginny said quietly. "Real help. We can't do this alone anymore." "From who?" Neville asked. "McGonagall. She's doing everything she can without getting sacked. The Order, they're barely holding together, according to my Gran's letters. Harry? He's got his own impossible mission." "Then we create a bigger disruption," Ginny said, her tactical mind already working. "Something so chaotic the Carrows can't focus on Muggle-born registration. Buy time for the families to go into hiding." "What kind of disruption?" Seamus asked through the mirror. Before anyone could answer, the door to the room burst open and Dennis Creevey stumbled through, his face bleeding and his robes torn. "Carrows," he gasped. "They've got a group of second years, caught them trying to sneak food from the kitchens to Safe House 2. They're taking them to the dungeons now." Neville's exhaustion vanished, replaced by cold clarity. "How many second years?" 4. All Gryffindors. "They'll be tortured, Neville. Carrow said they were going to make examples." The room erupted in chaos. Students shouting, demanding action, fear and anger mixing into a volatile combination. "We have to rescue them," Hannah said. "We can't," Ginny countered. "The dungeons are too well defended. We'd never make it out." "So we just leave them?" Michael demanded. "I didn't say that." "Enough!" Neville's voice cut through the chaos. He was surprised by his own volume, by the authority in his tone. Everyone fell silent. "Luna, show me the map. Dungeon section, full detail." Luna expanded the magical map's view of the lower levels. Neville studied the corridors, the patrol patterns, the location of the detention rooms. "There," he said, pointing to a corridor that ran behind the main detention area. "That portrait passage. It comes out near Snape's office, but there's a branching path that might get us close to where they're holding the second years." "Might?" Ginny asked. "The dungeon's portraits aren't as cooperative as the upper-level ones. Slytherin's domain. They're loyal to different values." Neville traced a route with his finger. "But if we can get Sir Cadogan to cause a distraction in the entrance hall, something loud enough to draw Carrow away from the dungeons, we might have a 5-minute window." "And then what?" Seamus asked. "Even if we get the second years out, Carrow will know it was us. He'll escalate. Maybe start arresting students at random until someone confesses." "Then we make sure he can't," Neville said, the plan forming even as he spoke. "We don't just rescue the second years, we make it impossible for the Carrows to operate. We sabotage their authority so completely that the school descends into chaos." "That's suicide," someone said. "Maybe." Neville looked around at his friends, at Ginny with her fierce determination, at Luna with her unshakable calm, at Hannah and Dennis and Seamus and all the students who'd trusted him. "But sitting here watching people get tortured is worse. We've been playing defense for 3 months. It's time to attack. Attack how? Luna asked, genuinely curious. Neville felt something shift inside him, the last of his uncertainty burning away, replaced by the same reckless courage that had made his parents into legends. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. We give the Carrows what they want, he said. A target, someone to blame, someone to punish. Understanding dawned on Ginny's face, followed immediately by horror. No, Neville, you can't. I can, and I will. Neville's voice was steady now, certain. I'll turn myself in. Say I'm the leader of the resistance. Say I've been sheltering Muggleborns and organising all the disruptions. The Carrows have been looking for someone to make an example of. Let them have me. They'll use the Cruciatus curse, Hannah said, her voice shaking. They'll torture you for information about everyone else. Then I'll make sure I don't know where everyone else is. Neville looked at Luna. You take over coordination of the safe houses. Ginny handles rescue operations. Seamus manages communication. You distribute the mirrors and the galleons to a wider network, so if some people are caught, the whole system doesn't collapse. This is insane, Michael said, but there was something like respect in his voice now. This is leadership, Luna said softly, echoing what she'd told Neville months ago. Putting yourself at risk to protect others. No. Ginny's voice was flat, absolute. I won't let you sacrifice yourself like some martyr. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Neville felt frustration boiling over. Don't you see? The Carrows won't stop. The Ministry won't stop. They'll keep escalating until students are dying. At least this way, I can control the damage, give you all time to regroup, to adapt. By letting them break you? Ginny's eyes were bright with unshed tears. By giving up everything we've built. By saving the 4 second years in the dungeons right now, Neville shot back. By protecting the 23 Muggleborns who are terrified for their families. By being the leader this resistance needs, which means making the hard choices. The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, weighted with understanding and grief. There has to be another option, Seamus said desperately. Something we're not seeing. If there is, we don't have time to find it. Neville checked the map. The 4 second years had been moved into a detention room. Amicus Carrow was with them. Every minute we debate, those kids are suffering. I can end it. I can give the Carrows what they want, and buy the rest of you time to survive. How long do you think you'll survive their interrogation? Michael asked bluntly. Long enough. Luna stood and walked over to Neville. She studied his face with her unsettling intensity, as if reading something written in his features that no one else could see. You've decided, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Then we support you, but not the way you're planning. Luna turned to address the room. Neville's right that we need a major disruption. He's wrong that he has to sacrifice himself alone. If the Carrows want a resistance to punish, we'll give them one. All of us. Luna, Neville started. Let me finish. Her voice remained gentle, but implacable. We rescued the second years tonight. But we do it publicly. We make it impossible for the Carrows to ignore. Impossible for them to pretend they have control. We show every student in this school that resistance is possible. How? Ginny asked, leaning forward. Luna smiled her dreamy smile, but her eyes were sharp. We give Hogwarts back to the students. We remind the castle who it really serves. And we do it in a way the Carrows can never undo. She outlined her plan quickly and efficiently. It was ambitious. It was dangerous. It was completely mad. It was perfect. "We'll need everyone," Neville said when she finished. "Every single DA member, every student we've sheltered, everyone we've trained. This isn't a covert operation. This is an open rebellion." "Then let's rebel," Ginny said, her expression fierce and determined. "Properly, this time." The room transformed around them as students began preparing. The space rearranged itself into an armory, shield spells being practiced, stunning hexes reviewed, strategy discussed in urgent whispers. The 7 safe houses received mirror calls, students streaming back through portrait passages to join the effort. Within an hour, 63 students had gathered. Gryffindors, Ravenclaws, Hufflepuffs, even a handful of Slytherins who were sick of the Carrow's cruelty. First years, barely old enough to cast a proper Lumos, stood beside 7th years who'd fought in the Department of Mysteries. Muggleborns and purebloods and half-bloods, all united by a single purpose: take back their school. Neville stood before them, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes. These were children. Most of them were younger than him. All of them were looking to him for leadership. He thought of his parents in St. Mungo's, thought of his grandmother's letters warning him not to be a hero, thought of Harry somewhere in Britain, hunting Horcruxes with the weight of the wizarding world on his shoulders. "You are not your father," Gran had written. No, but he could choose to be brave anyway. "Thank you for coming," Neville said, his voice carrying through the room. "What we're about to do is dangerous. Some of us might get hurt. Some of us might get expelled or arrested. But we're doing it anyway, because 4 second years are being tortured in the dungeons right now. Because 23 Muggleborns are being hunted, because Hogwarts is supposed to be a home and the Carrows have turned it into a prison." He pulled out his wand, his father's wand, passed down through his grandmother, carrying the weight of legacy. "Tonight, we take it back. We rescue those second years. We sabotage every piece of Carrow authority we can reach. We remind this school what Dumbledore's army stands for." Neville's voice grew stronger. "We might fail, we might lose, but we'll do it together, and we'll do it with our heads held high." "For Dumbledore," someone shouted. "For Hogwarts," another voice joined in. The chant built like a wave, 63 voices united. "For Dumbledore, for Hogwarts, for the DA." Neville felt something break inside his chest, but it wasn't defeat or fear. It was the last of his self-doubt shattering, replaced by certainty. He wasn't Frank Longbottom. He wasn't Harry Potter. He was Neville Longbottom, and that was enough. "Move out," he ordered, "and remember, we protect each other, no matter what." They poured out of the room of requirement, through a dozen different portrait passages, spreading throughout the castle like a flood. The operation Luna had designed was elegant in its chaos. Simultaneous disruptions on every floor, making it impossible for the Carrows to respond to everything at once. Neville led the main group toward the dungeons, Ginny on his left and Luna on his right. Behind them came the strike team, 20 students trained in defensive magic, ready to extract the second years and fight their way out if necessary. As they descended through the castle, Neville noticed something extraordinary. The portraits weren't just watching, they were helping. Frames swung open to reveal passage after passage. Painted figures called out encouragement. Sir Cadogan began his promised distraction in the entrance hall, challenging suits of armour to duels and creating tremendous noise. Even the castle itself seemed to respond. Staircases aligned perfectly for their approach. Doors opened before they reached them. The stones hummed with something that felt like approval. Hogwarts remembered what it was supposed to be, and it was choosing its side. They reached the corridor outside the detention room where the second years were being held. Through the door, Neville could hear crying and Amicus Carrow's mocking laughter. He looked at Ginny and Luna and saw his own determination reflected in their faces. "Ready?" he whispered. "Ready," they answered together. Neville raised his wand and blasted the door open. What happened next would become legend in the halls of Hogwarts, the night the students fought back. The night Dumbledore's army stopped hiding and started winning. But in that moment, as Neville charged into the detention room with his friends at his side and his father's wand blazing, with light, he felt only one thing: free. Finally, terrifyingly, wonderfully free. Neville's wand felt like it was burning in his hand, but he couldn't tell if it was from the spells he'd been casting or from something deeper, some connection to his father's magic finally awakening after 17 years of waiting. The detention room was chaotic. Amicus Carrow had spun at their entrance, his wand already raised, his face twisted with rage and surprise. The 4 second years huddled in the corner, their faces tear-streaked and terrified, and between them and freedom stood a Death Eater who'd been torturing children for sport. Stupefy! Neville's spell shot forward, red light blazing. Carrow deflected it with casual ease, his counterattack a sickly green that Neville recognized with horror. The killing curse. He dove sideways, feeling the spell pass so close it stirred his hair. Longbottom! Carrow's smile was vicious. So the little resistance leader finally shows his face. I was wondering when you'd be brave enough, or stupid enough, to come to me. Ginny was already moving, her wand flashing through a series of hexes that forced Carrow backward. Luna herded the second years toward the door, her movements calm despite the chaos. Behind them, the strike team poured into the corridor, engaging with Electo Carrow, who'd arrived as backup. Neville blocked another curse, his shield charm holding despite Carrow's brutal force. "Get them out!" he shouted to Luna. "Not without you," she called back. 3 months ago, Neville would have panicked, would have frozen in the face of a real Death Eater's fury. But 3 months of leadership, of making impossible choices, of watching students depend on him for their survival had changed something fundamental. He wasn't afraid anymore. Or rather, he was terrified. But he'd learned to fight through the fear. Diffindo! The cutting curse he sent at Carrow was one he'd practiced for hours, perfecting the wand movement until it became muscle memory. Carrow's robes tore, a line of blood appearing on his arm. The Death Eater's expression shifted from mockery to genuine anger. "You'll pay for that, boy. I'll make sure." Whatever threat he was about to make died, as the entire castle seemed to shudder. Neville felt it through the stone floor, a deep, resonating pulse of magic that vibrated through his bones. Around them, the walls flickered with light, the torches burned suddenly brighter. And through the castle, echoing from floor to floor, came a sound like a great bell ringing. Luna's disruptions had begun. Throughout Hogwarts, 63 students were executing their coordinated rebellion. Weasley's wildfire. Whiz-bangs exploded in corridors, portraits sang revolutionary songs at top volume. Suits of armor marched in formation, blocking passages and creating impenetrable barriers. House elves, led by Dobby's fierce loyalty to Harry Potter's friends, began vanishing ministry propaganda and replacing it with DA recruitment posters. And in the room of requirement, no longer hidden but broadcasting its presence like a beacon, enchanted graffiti was appearing throughout the castle. Words that couldn't be removed, couldn't be covered, burned in silver light across walls and floors and ceilings. Dumbledore's army. Still recruiting, still fighting. Caro's attention wavered as the chaos reached even the dungeons. Neville pressed his advantage, sending a stunning spell that caught the Death Eater in the shoulder and sent him staggering. "Now!" Ginny shouted. "Everyone out!" They ran. The strike team surged through portrait passages, carrying the rescued second years between them. Neville heard Electo Caro screaming for reinforcements behind them, but the castle's staircases were moving of their own accord now, shifting to block pursuit, opening shortcuts for the fleeing students. They emerged on the 7th floor to find absolute pandemonium. Students ran through corridors wielding wands and laughter in equal measure. A group of third years had transformed an entire hallway into a swamp that trapped 2 Slytherin prefects. Peeves conducted an orchestra of enchanted instruments, the cacophony drowning out any attempt at orders, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, silver words blazed with defiant light. "Hogwarts belongs to the students. You cannot break us. We are Dumbledore's army." Neville stumbled to a halt, staring in wonder. This wasn't just a rescue operation. This was a revolution. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Luna appeared beside him, her expression serene despite the chaos. "The castle's helping. It's been waiting for students to fight back. Now it's fighting with us." A portrait nearby, Vindictus Viridian, the medieval wizard who'd first shown Luna the secret passages, called out. "Students approach from the east corridor, 20 or more, and they don't look hostile." Neville turned to see a flood of students emerging from various staircases. Not DA members, but others. 5th years and 6th years, and even a handful of 7th years who'd been keeping their heads down, trying to survive until graduation. Now they held their wands ready, their faces set with determination. "We heard the noise," a Ravenclaw prefect named Anthony Goldstein said. "Figured we'd see what was happening, saw the graffiti, saw what you lot are doing." He raised his wand. "Where do you need us?" Neville felt something swell in his chest, hope, fierce and bright. "Help barricade the main staircases," he said, falling into the leadership role without thinking. "Keep the Caros separated. Don't engage directly unless you have to. Just slow them down, create obstacles." More students kept arriving. Word was spreading through the castle faster than fire, carried by portraits and ghosts and the simple electric energy of rebellion. Not all of them joined. Some fled to their dormitories, wanting no part of the chaos. But enough stayed. Enough fought. Hogwarts was taking itself back. By midnight, the castle had descended into organized chaos. The Caros had barricaded themselves in the defense against the dark arts classroom, unable to navigate the constantly shifting staircases and portrait passage networks. Snape had appeared briefly on the 4th floor, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the mayhem. Neville had tensed for confrontation, but the headmaster had simply looked at him for a long moment before sweeping away into his office without a word. McGonagall maintained her official neutrality, but Neville noticed the way staircases seemed to shift in the DA's favour whenever she was nearby. Notice the way her attempts to disperse students somehow always gave them time to slip away through convenient passages. The castle had become a maze of resistance, and at its heart sat the room of requirement. No longer hiding, but standing proud as the headquarters of something bigger than any of them had imagined. Neville stood in the room now, surrounded by exhausted but triumphant students. The second years they'd rescued were being tended by Hannah, who discovered an unexpected talent for healing magic. The Muggleborns from the safe houses had emerged from hiding, their families warned through house elf messengers to go underground immediately. And everywhere, students shared stories of their small victories. Hexes landed, obstacles created, authority defied. "We can't hold this forever," Ginny said quietly, standing beside Neville at the window. Her face was smudged with soot, and her robes were torn, but she'd never looked more fierce. "Eventually, reinforcements will come. More Death Eaters, Ministry officials. We've made too much noise to ignore." "I know," Neville said, "but we've bought time. The Muggleborns' families can hide. Students know they're not alone anymore. And the Carrows," he smiled slightly, "they'll never have absolute control again. We've shown everyone it's possible to fight back." "At what cost?" Michael Corner approached, his expression complicated. "Neville, I was wrong earlier. What I said about you playing general, that was unfair. You've been incredible tonight. But Ginny's right. We can't sustain this. And when the hammer falls, they'll come for the leaders first. Then the leaders will face them." Neville felt the exhaustion pulling at him, but also something else. A deep, settled peace. He'd done what needed doing. Led when leadership was required, protected the students who trusted him. "Whatever happens next, we did this. We showed them that Hogwarts doesn't belong to Death Eaters." Luna joined them, holding one of her mirrors. "McGonagall wants to speak with you. She's in the entrance hall." Neville exchanged glances with Ginny. "Could be a trap." "Could be helped," Luna countered. "The castle trusts her. I trust the castle." They made their way down through portrait passages, emerging behind a tapestry near the entrance hall. McGonagall stood alone by the great doors, her back straight and her expression stern as always. But when she turned to face them, Neville saw something unexpected in her eyes. Pride. "Mr. Longbottom," she said crisply. "Miss Weasley, Miss Lovegood, I trust you're responsible for this evening's disruptions." "Yes, Professor," Neville said, lifting his chin. "We rescued 4 second years from torture. We protected 23 Muggleborns from Ministry persecution. And we reminded the students that Hogwarts is supposed to be a safe place to learn." McGonagall's lips twitched. "I see. And in the process, you've created enough chaos to make the Weasley twins look restrained. The situation required bold action, Professor." "Indeed." McGonagall stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I cannot officially condone what you've done. As Deputy Headmistress under Snape's authority, I must maintain order and discipline." Neville's heart sank. "You're going to turn us in." "I'm going to do no such thing." McGonagall's voice was fierce now. "I'm going to tell you that reinforcements are coming. Death Eaters from the Ministry, arriving by Flu Network within the hour. Snape requested them to restore order. They will not be gentle." "Then we fight them too," Ginny said immediately. "You will not." McGonagall's tone brooked no argument. "You are children, no matter how brave. You've done more than anyone could ask. You've shown incredible courage. but I will not watch students die when there's another option." "What option?" Neville asked. McGonagall pulled something from her robes, a small, ancient-looking coin. "The Order of the Phoenix is scattered, but not broken. We've been waiting for the right moment to act. I believe this is it. A student uprising at Hogwarts, students defending other students. This is exactly the symbol the Resistance needs." She pressed the coin into Neville's hand. "I will contact what remains of the Order. They will come, but you must hold the castle until they arrive. Can you do that?" Neville looked at the coin, feeling its weight. Then he looked at his friends, Ginny with her fierce determination, Luna with her unshakable calm. "How long do we need to hold?" "Dawn. Perhaps a few hours have passed." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Longbottom, your grandmother would be proud. Your parents would be proud. You've become the leader this school needed." "I'm terrified, Professor." "Good. That means you understand the stakes." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The castle is on your side. Trust it. Hogwarts has been protecting students for 1,000 years. It won't stop now." She swept away, leaving them standing in the entrance hall with a borrowed coin and a few hours until dawn. They returned to the room of requirement and gathered the core group: Seamus, Hannah, Michael, the Pattle twins, Dennis, Ernest, everyone who'd been fighting since the beginning. "We have until dawn," Neville said simply. "The Order's coming. We just need to hold the castle until they arrive." "And if we can't?" Seamus asked. "Then we tried. We stood up. We fought back." Neville looked around at the faces that had become so familiar over these months. "Whatever happens, we did this together. We showed the Carrows they couldn't break us. We showed ourselves we're braver than we thought." Luna stood, moving to the center of the room. "The castle will help. I can feel it. Hogwarts is awake in ways it hasn't been in years. Every staircase, every portrait, every suit of armor remembers what we're fighting for." "Then let's give them something to fight for," Ginny said, her eyes blazing. "Let's hold this castle until help arrives. And if the Death Eaters want Hogwarts, they'll have to go through every single one of us first." The students spread throughout the castle, taking positions at key corridors and staircases. The portraits coordinated communication. The suits of armor formed defensive lines. And in the room of requirement, supplies appeared as if summoned by the castle itself. Healing potions, food, water, everything they'd need to survive a siege. Neville stood at one of the enchanted windows, watching the sky begin to lighten. Not quite dawn yet, but soon. Behind him, Luna hummed softly as she calibrated the mirrors one last time. Ginny paced, reviewing defensive positions on the magical map. His hands had stopped shaking. The scar on his jaw had stopped aching. And the weight of his father's wand felt right now, not a burden, but a gift. "Neville," Luna said softly, "whatever happens today, you should know. You've already won. You've shown everyone that fear doesn't have to win, that children can be brave, that Hogwarts still stands for something good." "We've won," Neville corrected, "all of us together." Through the windows, the first rays of dawn broke over the forbidden forest. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the sound of approaching magic. Reinforcements, Death Eaters, the final confrontation. But he also heard something else. The sound of students singing in the corridors. The portraits' call for encouragement. The castle itself hummed with determination. They were ready. Neville Longbottom, who'd spent 6 years being afraid, who'd been told he'd never amount to much, who'd grown into leadership when it was needed most, stood with his friends and waited for the dawn. And when the battle came, when the Death Eaters poured through the Floo network and McGonagall's voice echoed through the halls, calling all defenders, when the true fight for Hogwarts began, he was ready. They all were. Because they'd learned the most important lesson Dumbledore's army could teach. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing together when standing alone would be easier. It's fighting for what's right when the cost is high. It's holding the line until help arrives, and trusting that dawn will come. The castle shook with the sound of spells. Students ran to positions. The Order of the Phoenix began arriving through secret passages, led by the portrait's guidance. And somewhere in Britain, Harry Potter felt his coin burn warm and knew. His army had never stopped fighting. They'd just been waiting for their moment. And that moment was now.